hearing flashbangs, which presumably was the Capitol Police trying to get the protesters to back off. Things continued to escalate. The protesters got more violent, and somehow they breached the security perimeter, which had actually happened in an office building earlier that day, which had to be evacuated. And then all of a sudden, the protesters were in the statuary hall. They were breaking the windows to get into the House floor, and Vice President Pence had to be evacuated by Secret Service. And then, of course, as you led with at the beginning of your program, someone was tragically shot and killed. So it was a very chaotic situation. It's something you would have never expected to see in the United States Capitol. And I think the challenge before us, I think you rightly lay it out, Tucker, which is we have to be very sensitive to the sincere concerns of millions of Americans about voter processes, last-second changes to voter processes in the midst of a pandemic, while also preventing further political violence like this. It's a difficult thing to do. I think, I've opposed the objection just for constitutional reasons, but I think some of the practical mistakes made was this idea that we could somehow have, over the course of 2 hours of debate in Congress, meaningfully elucidate what happened in the 2020 election without giving people false hope that somehow the election results might change on January 6th, or that Vice President Pence might change those results, which is, of course, not true. Even the objectors behind closed doors were saying that that would never happen. And that's just, I think, a little bit too much of a cynical game to play with the American people who do have serious concerns about election irregularities.
Well, yeah, but the more basic concern is this, and I felt it myself just watching the Senate Majority Leader speaking there. This is someone who just doesn't understand the frustration that people feel and isn't that interested in learning about it at all. I mean, a lot of the woman who was killed, we're just getting news reports, apparently was a married 14-year military veteran. So a lot of these people are not dispossessed. They're not some, creepy androgynous blogger who shows up to burn things down. They're like kind of solid Americans, and they're deeply frustrated. And I wonder if people in Washington, where I spent most of my life, really understand and empathize with their frustration. Sincere question.
Well, I think anyone who's telling you that business as usual in D.C. is going to get the job done and somehow these people are going to move on is lying to you. I think what we're witnessing here is not just a specific frustration about the election, but a culmination of a loss of faith in the basic institutions of our country, foremost among them Congress, an institution in which I work that has an 11% approval rating. But the media as well. I think the media has self-immolated over the last 4 years. And what I've confronted over the last 2 months, as I've tried to dispassionately examine the claims of election fraud, is a lot of people I represent don't know what's true and what isn't. They don't trust legacy media sources. They're glomming onto things they read on Twitter. And so we don't have a foundation that we share for analysis. And so I do think it would be a mistake to dismiss the concerns. I've racked my brain as to what the most responsible outcome is. And the only thing I've been able to come up with, and you can tell me if you think this is stupid, is that every state is going to have to do a version of what Florida did post-2000. Take a look at their voting processes. It should be the top priority for the state legislature in my home state of Wisconsin and every other where we've seen irregularities, and say this is what worked, this is what didn't. The fundamental original sin of our election system is that we've turned election day into election week into election month. But that can happen as a separate process while we still support a peaceful transition of power, because I just can't look my constituents in the face and somehow tell them that Donald Trump's going to be president on January 21st.
No, well, you can't lie to people.
And no action of Congress is going to make that so.
Look, you can't lie to people. But you have to credibly say to people, I hear you. I hear you. And I do think one of the reasons that so many Americans, some of whom aren't that political, are so emotionally attached to the president, whatever his faults, is that he does say, I hear you, and no one else does. And that's the one thing that he says that they believe, I guess. And I just think it's worth learning from that. I don't know, why am I giving you this lecture? Because I feel it, and I'm upset about it. Congressman, I appreciate it, and pardon my rambling.
Thank you, sir.
Drew Hernandez is an investigative reporter with the Tatum Report. He was already in the Capitol building as all of this began, and he's got some exclusive video for us. Drew, it's good to see you tonight. What'd you see?
Yeah, Tucker, it was pretty peaceful today near the Washington Monument, but as the march continued to the nation's capital here in D.C., things got a little crazy. I think you could see from the footage, demonstrators, some Trump supporters, the rumor is that even possibly Antifa, insurrectionists, possibly could have infiltrated some of these movements and maybe instigated some of this. Doesn't excuse some of the behavior, but I think it's pretty simple, pretty clear. People are frustrated. They stormed the Capitol. They did vandalize. They did go through the doors. They pushed down gates. They wanted their voices to be heard. But to go to your point, listening to you guys talking, I think our elected officials, the least they could have done, Tucker, was at least conduct some kind of investigation for the American people. 74 million Americans that believe that this election is fraudulent. The least they could have done was prove that it was accurate. I mean, why can't they give them closure? We had 4 years of the Russian hoax, of election meddling from Donald Trump conspiring with Russia in order to win 2016, and the left had closure. It was proven that that was false. So why can't the right have closure? Why can't conservatives? Why can't Trump supporters have closure? I think our elected officials have a responsibility to at least show the American people what actually happened. And it doesn't help, Tucker, when you have big tech giants like Facebook and Twitter censoring every single thing that comes out that had to do with the 2020 election. It doesn't give people closure. It makes people even more conspiratorial. And it doesn't give people the peace that they need to know that what happened with their electoral process was accurate. And right now, I think we're seeing the downfall of our elected officials not providing that to the American people.
Well, I agree with that. I just want to be clear. I feel like we're above vandalism. People I love and know and agree with, I was never be for breaking things, ever, under any circumstances. On the other hand, there's a reason that this is happening. And it's happening, as you just said, because the people with all the power have decided to clamp down so harshly on the population